Well, I mean, sometimes
I'm gonna go around as well.
I just try to stay on side.
There's a long list of those. So much.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? I can't believe we haven't met in all of my dealings with Google. Talk to you guys like a week, if not more.
Yep. I'm on those calls sometimes.
Are you okay?
Usually letting Alvaro talk,
Okay.
if you're familiar with him.
Good morning.
Dinesh.
How are you? Yeah, virtually and yeah.
Sean Connolly said hi.
I'm the one on the background.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
How's Sean doing?
Okay.
Big old tracking all
Sean's
the
just the
stuff.
best. I just love that.
That's why I don't talk a lot. I'm talking all day.
Yeah, we've had so many great conversations about obviously all of this stuff. So yeah, haven't talked to him in ever, at least since we started. Well, I guess since I was doing the regular stuff with like
That I really jumped in on.
identities.
Oh yeah, I was one of the presenters for the Dominic.
Got the same issue with
Start acronym.
Adam.
That should be our first one. I think it's actually maybe the same too, because we did it for Stepper Pie. Now we're like
The way around. Yeah, this is or something.
and I'm just like, I think we said before, it's still the same. Please don't change. Like you said.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee. My name is Michelle White, and I'm the designated federal officer, DFO, for this advisory committee. I would like to thank all of our presenters, attendees, and stakeholders for joining us today, including those who provided public comment. Public comments submitted via the FSCAC public comment form last Wednesday, May 17th, 2023, have been provided to the committee members. Before we start, there are a few things you should know. This meeting is being recorded via video conference and is also being streamed live at gsa.gov/FSCAC. As you may know, this advisory committee is statutorily required under the James M. Inhofe National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, and thus formally established under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA, as of our charter's official filing date of February 28th, 2023. This committee is considered a federal advisory committee and is governed by the requirements under FACA. My role as the DFO is to manage the day-to-day administrative operations of the committee, attend all committee meetings, and ensure the committee operates in compliance with FACA. The duties of the committee include providing advice and recommendations to the GSA administrator, the FedRAMP board, and agencies on technical, financial, programmatic, and operational matters regarding secure adoption of cloud computing products and services. The majority of work for this committee will be focused around the FedRAMP Authorization Act of 2022 statutory requirements and purpose, specifically to examine the operations of FedRAMP and determine ways that the authorization process can continuously be improved, collect information and feedback on agency compliance with and implementation of FedRAMP requirements, and serve as a forum that facilitates communication and collaboration among FedRAMP stakeholder community. All committee members have received training regarding FACA requirements and their ethics obligations as regular government employees and/or representatives. In addition, each committee member has completed a financial disclosure report that has been reviewed by ethics attorneys to identify any potential conflicts of interest. Lastly, I do want to note that attendance has been reviewed and we do have a quorum established. I will now go through a roll call for all council members. Please let us know you are present by stating here. Ann Lewis.
Present.
Victor Brown.
Here.
Victor Brown is virtual.
Yes, I'm here.
Michael Basurka. Ravi Yaganathan.
Here.
John Greenstein.
Present.
Marcy Womack.
Here.
Bronco Boken. Matt Scholl.
Here.
Bo Burles.
Present.
Lamont Yarbrough.
Here.
Naman Ansari.
Here.
Jackie Snowfer.
Here.
Bill Hunt.
Here.
And Joshua Cohen.
Here.
Thank you all for attending this important meeting. Just a few more housekeeping items to remember for our members. When asking questions, please hold all questions until the end of the presentation, but please make sure to make note of them during the presentations. At the end of the presentations, you will have a question. If you have a question, please turn your name tent to the side so that it stands up and that will indicate that you have a question and I will call on you. I ask members to identify themselves when they are speaking into microphones so that those listening via webcast or reading the minutes after the meeting will know who made which comment. And please make sure your microphone is turned off after your comment is made. To our speakers, open forum and presenters today, please note that we have a red card held up. The first time will indicate that you have 1 minute left to speak. And the second time will indicate that you are out of time. We are on a tight schedule today, so please be respectful of the time on the card. There will be an open public comment period this afternoon with 3 minutes allowed for each speaker. We will be interrupting speakers who exceed 3 minutes to allow more people to speak. So please speak succinctly and please be respectful of the time. If you are not a committee member, please hold all questions and comments until this time. All public comments submitted by Wednesday, May 17th were presented to the committee members prior to this meeting. If you are not called on to provide public comment today and have not already, you are welcome to submit your comments using our form on our website, www.gsa.gov/FSCAC. Thank you all. We will now begin our meeting by going around the table and introducing ourselves. Members, please say your name and your agency or organization when it is your turn. May we please start with Bill?
Bill Hunt, U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission.
Bronco Boken, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency.
Michael Vasarka, Google.
Jackie Snoffer, Defense Information Systems Agency.
Joshua Cohen, Department of Veterans Affairs.
Ravi Jagannathan, Palo Alto Networks.
Ann Lewis, Technology Transformation Services at GSA.
Naman Ansari, Senior Procurement Executive at the SBA.
Bo Burles, GSA IT, U.S. General Services Administration.
John Greenstein, Bluescape Software.
Lamont Yarbrough, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
RC Womack, Shellman.
Matthew Scholl, National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Thank you all. We want to thank you all. Now I have the honor to present Robin Carnahan, GSA Administrator. Robin currently serves as the Administrator of the U.S. General Services Administration. As administrator, she has working to empower GSA career professionals and build on the agency's efforts to deliver the best value in real estate acquisition and technology services to the federal government and American people. Prior to joining GSA, Robin served as in executive leadership roles in business, academia, and government, including as the Secretary of State for Missouri, and founded and led the state and local government practice at 18F, a technology consultancy inside GSA. She is a nationally recognized government technology leader, and in 2017 was named one of the federal government's top women in tech. Most recently, she was a fellow at Georgetown University's Beck Center, where she co-founded the State Software Collaborative. As Secretary of State, Robin also served as the state's chief election officer and state securities regulator, and was responsible for providing in-person and online services to hundreds and thousands of customers. An essential part of her job was leading the office's technology modernization efforts across 7 operating divisions. She frequently speaks, writes, and testifies about government innovation through smarter use of technology. While previously at GSA, Robin helped federal, state, and local government agencies improve customer-facing digital services and cut costs. She focused on training and empowering non-technical executives on ways to reduce risk and deliver better results for the public by more effective budgeting, procuring, implementing, and overseeing digital modernization products. Robin holds a bachelor's degree in economics from William Jewell College and a JD from the University of Virginia School of Law. Robin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Michelle, and thanks so much to all of you. I could not be more excited to welcome all the members of the inaugural committee of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee. So thanks for being part of this, especially the 14 members that come from both the public and private sector. Just thrilled to have you and have your service. I know that all of you are going to bring really, really valuable insights and expertise to this job. And I also know that you're all really busy, juggling plenty of professional and personal responsibilities. And the fact that you volunteered to do this says a lot to me and to all of us about your commitment to serving your country and making things better than when you found them. So I appreciate that very much. And on behalf of the president and the Biden administration, I just want to thank you for your service. Thanks to Ann. I can't see you because I'm there's your hand. Hi, Ann. Thanks to, she's our TTS director, as you know. Appreciate you leading this. Zach, Michelle, they're our designated federal officers. They are going to keep the committee working efficiently and make sure we're all working within the bounds of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. So that's very important. So thank you all for that. And of course, members of the public, thanks for joining. You know, I often say that government is basically a service delivery business, and that public's trust in government is directly related to how well and how efficiently and effectively government delivers those services to them. It's personal. And it especially matters at really critical moments. And we saw it throughout the pandemic when people turned to government, and over again, that interaction did not engender trust. So whether it's small businesses or farmers looking to access loans, or veterans looking to access healthcare, or students looking for something from the government, there are so many things that directly touch people through the digital services that we provide them. And so today we know that we need to have simple, seamless, and secure digital services. The best way to do that, you all know, is to make sure those are done through secure cloud-based products and services. That's why the work of this committee is so important. And you all know FedRAMP it's the authorization process. It's the gate that literally every single thing, every cloud-based tool has to go through if it's going to interact with the public. That's a big deal. And I'm convinced that's why the work that we do together to improve FedRAMP is perhaps going to be some of the longest lasting, most impactful work we can possibly do. And it's going to change and improve millions of people's lives. So modernizing this process, how it works, automating things, streamlining functionality, rethinking governance structures, all of those things are on the table. And we want to hear your thoughts, folks from the public sector who've dealt with it, private sector who've dealt with it, ideas about how to make that better. But what is not negotiable are really the foundational principles that drive all of this work. And that's protecting national security, protecting government assets, protecting personal privacy, and doing this at the same time that we are accessing best-in-class digital solutions to serve all of our people. Now, FedRAMP, you know, has been around for about a dozen years. And during that time, a lot of agencies have taken advantage of that and been able to get access to cutting-edge cloud technology. But if there's one thing that we know for sure, is the technology changes really fast. So we need a process for authorizing the use of these new tools that keeps up with the scale and the speed of change. Today, we know that nearly every major cloud provider has FedRAMP offerings, but we also know that the process of getting through that authorization is a pain. It needs to be simpler, faster, cheaper, especially for small businesses. Folks on the team know that I like to always ask, what does success look like? So let me tell you, for me, this process, success looks like to this. It just boils down to something pretty simple. And that's creating a FedRAMP process that is scalable, that's secure, and that's easy to use. And when I say easy to use, it means easy to use for the agency partners who are buying the cloud services that they need to meet their mission. It's easy to use for the businesses that want to have offerings to the government partners. And it's easy to use for millions of Americans who benefit from these kind of simple, streamlined, secure government services. Now, it's important that we remember that when we get this right, this isn't just about the federal government. It also, when we get it right, it paves the way for even greater impact because state and local governments often look to us in the federal government for best practices as they look to secure their own technology systems. And so I talk about all this stuff, not really as a trained technologist, but I am somebody who knows a lot of technologists. And if there's something I've learned about them, they tend to gravitate toward two kinds of things. One is really hard problems. And the second is work that has a big impact. So I will tell you, I can guarantee that the work of this committee checks both of those boxes because the complexity of providing simple and secure cloud services is only outpaced by the exponential growth that we know in the number of lives that are going to be touched by these tools. So just leave it with the fact that the urgency of this moment is very real. I believe that Americans' trust in their government depends on our democracy's ability and our government's ability to deliver for them. So that's what this is all about, helping that delivery go better, faster, cheaper, in ways that are secure. So thank you again for stepping up to serve the country at this really important moment. The stakes could not be higher. So let's get to work.
Robin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your comments and expression of how important you think this committee is. Now I'd like to introduce Sunny Hashmi, the Commissioner of the Federal Acquisition Service at GSA. Sunny Hashmi is the Commissioner of the U.S. General Services Administration's Federal Acquisition Service. In this position, he oversees the delivery of more than 87 billion of products, services, and solutions that enable federal agencies to efficiently accomplish their missions while saving taxpayer dollars. Known as a cloud computing thought leader, in the emerging technology industry. Sunny previously served as a managing director of global government strategy at Box. In that role, he worked with federal, state, local, and international government organizations on cloud and mobility strategy. Prior to joining Box, Sunny served as GSA's Chief Information Officer, the CIO, and Chief Technology Officer, the CTO. He led the agency's IT modernization strategy as GSA adopted cloud computing, agile acquisition, and DevSecOps principles, and helped create cloud computing and performance measurement roadmap for the federal government. Sunny is active in the federal IT community and has been recognized with several awards, including the Fed 100, Fed Scoop 50, and as a finalist of the prestigious Samuel J. Heyman Service to America Medal. He earned a master's degree in engineering from Purdue University and a master's certificate in innovation management from the University of Maryland. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Good morning. And thanks for reminding me to update my bio because that is ridiculously long and unnecessary. Thank you. Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for making the time to be part of this inaugural meeting of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee. My name is Sunny Hashmi. I'm the Commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service. I am just thrilled to be here. I have to tell you, and I also had the privilege of serving as the chair for the selection committee for this FACA. And I can tell you that we were spoiled for choice when it comes to amazing thought leaders who expressed interest in being part of this committee. So congratulations for being part of this inaugural team. We look forward to all the great things that you all are going to discuss and come up with and taking your guidance as we move forward. I've had the privilege of being associated with the FedRAMP program from literally its very inception back in 2011. I was a CIO for GSA and served as one of the original JAB members on the FedRAMP JAB board, working closely with Bo Burles and others. We had this moment back in 2011 when the need became acute to develop a common way for the federal government to trust its partnership with cloud service providers. At the time, in the absence of a common baseline and a common process, every cloud service provider had to go through a process of authorization and review with every agency that it did business with. Not only did it create an untenable amount of work on the cloud service providers side, but it created an unnecessary amount of duplication and rework on the government side. So the concept in partnership with OMB at that time was to create one common process and one effort to be able to have cloud service providers who have a common structure over and over again, to go through that process once and to be able to reuse that authorization by any agency who wants to use cloud. While looking back, it looks like that it was an easy process. I can tell you that it wasn't. In the absence of any ability to come together as a government and being able to develop not just a baseline of security controls, but also in the context of different mission areas, it was a very difficult challenge to make progress. However, I'm very proud to see what the team has accomplished over the last 12 years. When we started, the world looked very different. We had a small number of very large cloud service providers, and the program was designed originally with the concept that there's going to be a somewhat finite number of cloud service products and a finite need on the government side. And so we can create a program where we can predict the amount of effort and volume that we're going to be working with. But clearly, the world has changed quite a bit. It's not just a few cloud service providers that are providing these large infrastructure providers. In fact, every single technology, every single capability that the government leverages, everything from mission support systems to weapon systems to command and control systems to operational technology, it now relies on cloud. And that expectation, that need continues to grow. That's fantastic for the country. That's fantastic for our industry partners because the amount of innovation, the speed of that innovation continues to grow. And we want to create a process and rethink this process in a way that we can actually leverage and continue to take advantage of that innovation and that capability in the market. After leaving GSA last time, I also served as a person responsible at a cloud service provider, helping to get our product through the FedRAMP process. So I've seen this process from the other side. I know firsthand how difficult and challenging it can be. how painful it is to convince your board of directors that investing in the FedRAMP process is the right strategic move for the company. It's not cheap, it's not free, it's a significant amount of effort. And I also saw the opportunity and access that it unlocks when you actually do go through this process, not just for government buyers, but also buyers across other regulated industries. I remember our company, when we finally did achieve FedRAMP, opened conversations with financial services providers and banks and insurance companies and healthcare providers, because those industries also are looking for a baseline for trusting a cloud service provider. So while that's not the job of the TTS organization, the FedRAMP organization, we respect and take very seriously the fact that the work that we do here impacts many industries across the country. I also had the opportunity to advise the governments of Canada, the government of Japan, and Singapore, as well as the governments of the UK, on establishing a similar program in their jurisdictions. And they actively look at this program to mirror best practices in their environments. And now in my role as commissioner and working very closely with Anne and the FedRAMP team, I'm proud to make sure that we take this program forward. So while great progress has been made, when we started, the average authorization time took about 12 to 24 months. And with the great effort of the team, through a lot of focus on automation, reducing burden, reducing duplication, the average authorization takes about 7 to 8 months right now, so about cut in half. And in fact, JAB authorizations take about 4 to 5 months. We recognize that the scalability of the program is still limited. And it's not just about going through an authorization, it's about developing a relationship that continues through continuous monitoring. So with every new authorization that comes into the FedRAMP program, which continues to grow, there is an ongoing relationship that government and industry needs to maintain. And so we want to make sure that we create and evolve this program into one where that scalability can be maintained. And of course, ideally continue to draw down and drive down that cycle time. The work that you do here will matter. As Robin mentioned, this work will help us think about the next iteration of the program and really evolve it in the way that it needs to go. So with that, I would just want to again reiterate my thanks for you and your time. We look forward to your energy, your effort, and your thought leadership. And we look forward to enhancing the program for the benefit of not just the government, but also the private sector and the industry partners, as well as our international partners around the globe. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lenny. Now I would like to introduce our FSCAC chair, Ann Lewis, to make a few comments.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Lewis, and I was appointed in December as the Director of Technology Transformation Services, or TTS, at GSA, and I'm also the Deputy Commissioner of Federal Acquisition Services. I'm here today in my role as the Chair of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee. I'm really honored to be here. I've worked in tech for about 20 years at big companies, startups, nonprofits, consulting organizations. But for me as a technology leader, and I know many of you feel the same way, government is where the most rewarding and highest impact tech work is, and where choices about cloud architecture and offerings have a significant and long-term impact. As for my background, I'm a technologist through and through. I have a degree in computer science from Carnegie Mellon, and during my 20 plus years in tech, I've had the opportunity to work in the areas of full stack software development, distributed system scaling, cybersecurity, technical leadership, and most importantly in this context, cloud architecture, including witnessing firsthand the birth of the industry while working at what is now a major infrastructure as a service provider and seeing the industry grow. So as I've seen the impact of cloud computing in the private sector, I've also seen the impact in the public sector. And I'm so excited about the opportunity that we all have together to better empower technology leaders in agencies to make the right build versus buy choices for their agencies and programs so that they can deliver better government experiences to the public. As chair, my role today is to lead this group, facilitate discussions, make sure that we hear from all of you, and discussions that allow us to bring together our experience from many parts of industry and government, and to synthesize guidance and recommendations for the FedRAMP program. I'm eager to be a part of this discussion and conversation with a really impressive group of experts here at the table who really understand the impact of this work on agencies, programs, and ultimately the public. As I've been speaking with you this morning and today, I just wanted to say I'm very impressed with the experience and expertise we have around the table today. Not only do we have a strong representation of both federal government and industry leaders, but also years of experience in cybersecurity, cloud computing, cloud infrastructure, emerging technologies, cloud acquisition and procurement, and many other areas. So I just wanted to thank all of you for bringing this thought leadership and your experience and expertise to the table. The discussion and hard work that will happen in this room and moving forward over the next 5 years has the potential to create opportunities for cloud services that will meet some of our biggest challenges in the federal government and increase the FedRAMP marketplace. FedRAMP makes it possible for the federal government to access critical, secure, and best-in-class cloud services while protecting data and information. As a security partner across industry and the federal government, FedRAMP's security framework is designed to make it easier to incorporate a growing marketplace of services. FedRAMP provides a consistent authorization process and the tools, information, and training to enable the success of agencies, cloud providers, and assessors. Many agencies already leverage the benefits of cloud services. Veterans Administration, for example, has partnered with 13 different cloud providers over the last 2 years through their agency authority to operate and the FedRAMP authorization process. The VA's use of cloud services has enabled them to better provide veterans with the benefits that they've earned, such as home loans, education benefits, and healthcare. FedRAMP recently announced that they have reached 300 cloud service providers. This is a really impressive milestone. Federal agencies now have access to more cloud service offerings that they need to do their jobs effectively and efficiently, from providing remote access, providing scalability to existing systems, to rolling out collaboration and efficiency tools, just to name a few. As more cloud service offerings are authorized through the now very broad and diverse cloud marketplace, federal agencies have more options for cloud services, which can lead to increased competition, better pricing, and ultimately empowering federal government technology leaders to be able to make the right build versus buy and integration and enterprise architecture choices for their organizations. This is a significant milestone as it highlights the continued growth and the maturity of the FedRAMP program. The work that we will do together as a group will increase that number, increase the success, increase the number of offerings, improve the processes involved. And this work will be essential to providing cloud services to the government at even more attractive offerings and combinations and prices, increasing the breadth of services and sectors in the FedRAMP marketplace. And I also just want to note that partnerships between the private and the public sectors are essential to doing business in government. It's important that we work together and evolve collectively. It's also critical that we work closely with our industry partners as government leaders and leverage the knowledge and experience of the private sector so that we can evolve together in ways that best work for government. Together, we can do so much. Today, we're going to bring together government experts and industry experts and make cloud offerings a priority for the present and the future. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and to lead today's agenda. And I'll now move forward with reviewing our charter. Next slide, please. So our charter has been approved and filed with the appropriate bodies for record keeping as of February 28th, 2023. You have copies of it in your folders here, and it's also been posted online, and I think you also have email copies as well. So this charter goes over key items of information such as this committee's authority, our objectives, scope of activities, duties, the agency the committee reports to, our support, frequency of meetings, duration of the committee, membership and designation, etc. So I'd like to point out on this slide and also the next slide, if you would like the visual reference, briefly the scope and boundaries of the Federal Advisory Committee, as I know many agencies and organizations are eager to work with this committee. So to call your attention to section 3, the FSCAC will examine FedRAMP operations and advise the GSA administrator, the FedRAMP board, and agencies on how to ensure effective and ongoing coordination of agency adoption, use, authorization, monitoring, acquisition, and security of cloud computing products and services to enable agency mission and administrative priorities. So this defines the scope of our work here today. Any topic outside of the scope does not apply to the committee, but the scope itself you can see here is quite broad. And in particular, we play a critical role in providing advice to the committee, to the board, and also the FedRAMP team on how to scale operations over time. So paying attention to scope here, All requests for work products will need to come from the GSA administrator, not another organization or agency. So we report up to the GSA administrator, who you just met. So just to answer some questions that came up in our Monday briefing on the scope of our work here together. In scope are any operational considerations related to FedRAMP and how to achieve the goals stated in the charter. Out of scope are suggestions related to or representing individual company needs. But in scope are suggestions that we collectively come up with related to industry and agency needs. Also in scope are the OMB memo, which many of you have seen and read already, and also any other operational considerations that this group comes up with. So we get to determine what we talk about and what we prioritize within this scope. Topics for discussion are not dictated by an external body. They're determined by us, and we are ultimately providing recommendations to the GSA administrator. Additionally, in order to guide our conversations today and moving forward, I'd also like to set the stage that our advice and recommendations should be sector or even market-wide, which I know that many of you are already thinking about, a big picture view, a supply chain level view, and not specifically advocating for one particular company or one particular company's interest over another. It's important that we represent the fairest and most competitive incentives that will provide the government with the best cloud offerings that meet the needs of federal agency programs and technology leaders. So that is our mandate, and that is the scope of our work. Within that, we can determine which topics we think are highest priority to help us provide the best recommendations to the FedRAMP team. So I'll just pause there. That was a lot of information, and open up the floor for any questions that any of you might have about the charter. All right, 100% crystal clear on the charter. All right, great. Well, thank you all, and I will pass it back to Michelle.
All right, great. Well, thank you guys. We are scheduled for a short break. We are actually running quite a bit early, but I would request that we take a 15-minute break now and then have a longer lunch time so that you can accomplish more things during that break. So if you please go ahead and return by 10:20, we will reconvene. Thank you.
How is he doing? Oh my gosh. No, that's impossible. That violates my concept of space and time. Yeah. Wow. Yes, that's a big, yeah. Right, it's like, this is a person? It doesn't add up. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a truck along pretty good. We're gonna learn that. It's almost the same. Victims of
presenting some background information on the FedRAMP program to help us get started and give us some context for our discussion later this afternoon. In that discussion, we will begin talking about our priorities and what initiatives we want to work on with this committee. Brian joined the Federal Risk Authorization Management Program team at GSA in December 2018. He brought with him a wealth of technical knowledge and leadership experience. Brian acquired his foundational leadership, technical, and project management skills while serving as a United States Marine Corps member. Upon his transition from active duty, Brian joined Booz Allen Hamilton, where he spent over 7 years leveraging and growing his IT, cybersecurity, and project management skills, supporting various clients across Department of Defense, including U.S. Marine Corps, United States Navy, and the Chief Information Officer for the DoD. During this time, Brian became recognized as a cloud computing cybersecurity subject matter expert within the federal government. At GSA, Brian continues his service as the acting FedRAMP director since January 2021. In addition to his role as acting director, as the cybersecurity program manager, he leads multiple efforts associated with the Joint Authorization Board, the JAB, assessment and authorization activities that facilitate the authorization and adoption of commercial cloud services across the federal government. Brian's education includes senior executive fellowship at the Harvard John F. Kennedy School of Government, an MS in information technology management from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, and a BA in history with a minor in economics from the University of Memphis. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much. Anne, Michelle, members of the committee, it's great to be here to address you in your inaugural meeting. The goal for today is to give you a background on the FedRAMP program, basically where it stands now, and give you some information on some of our ongoing strategic initiatives, which I think are going to be germane to this committee's conversations. Next slide, please. This is a more detailed agenda, again, going with the program overview, the impact of the program, some goals and initiatives, and then I'm going to end the brief with some strengths and challenges that I think will be subject to conversation. Next slide. So it is FedRAMP. I'm not going to go into the history. Sunny did a great job of giving you the history of the program, but to say that the program has grown over the last dozen years, we still, next slide, please. Or wait. Yeah, we're good right there. I can't see, so I'm negotiating that. So the mission of FedRAMP stays the same. We want to continue to promote the adoption of secure cloud services utilizing a standardized approach to security and risk assessment. Okay, the vision is to accelerate the expansion of the marketplace of secure cloud services for federal agencies to use. That is the North Star that we keep our eyes on. We want to grow the marketplace. We want to have agencies to have access to a greater number and a more diverse set of commercial cloud services to use. Next slide. So FSMA requires agencies to authorize systems based on risk, and FedRAMP standardizes that for the cloud. We have the value proposition of the program is there's a do once, use many times. So when the security assessment is done, it can be reused across agencies the cloud providers security packages can be reused across agencies for whomever may be interested in using that particular cloud service. The increased collaboration between the stakeholder community, which includes agencies and cloud providers and the third-party assessors, didn't necessarily exist before. And that's one of the other benefits of the program is there's clear collaboration, communication across the stakeholder community. We do tons of outreach, meeting with cloud providers and 3PAOs and agencies to talk about their challenges and issues with FedRAMP. It's also characterized by validated work. So before a cloud provider comes on the marketplace, that security assessment has been validated by the FedRAMP PMO. In the cases of an agency authorization, we receive an ATO from the agency, their acceptance of risk. We receive the FedRAMP package, the standardized FedRAMP package using our standardized baselines, And then we do an examination of some critical controls and federal mandates before we issue the FedRAMP authorization and put it up on the marketplace. And we have a repository for central sharing. So if there's agencies who want to use or who are interested in using specific cloud providers, they can request access to the security packages, and they can then do their own assessment without, again, having to redo the work. Next slide, please. So like anything in the government, there's a legal and policy framework. FSMA requires agencies to protect federal information. OMB Circular A130 states that when agencies implement FSMA, they use the NIST controls. FedRAMP policy is basically taking the NIST controls and making them more cloudy, if you will, applying them to commercial cloud systems. And of course, we have the FedRAMP Authorization Act, which was passed recently in December, which formalizes the program and establishes this particular body. Next slide. So prior to the passing of the FedRAMP Authorization Act, this is what our governance structure looked like. I'm going to refer to the red banana on the left-hand side of the screen. That is the legacy JAB, the CIOs of GSA, DHS, and DoD. There's also interaction with the Office of Management and Budget, the Chief Information Officer Council, and NIST. Next slide. In post-legislation, this is what our governance structure looks like. In the legislation, we still have the FedRAMP board, which consists of GSA, DHS, and DoD, but there's also provisions for increasing the size of the board by up to 4 more members. We've also included in this slide the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee. You can see at the very top. And there's also the same players with OMB, the CISO, and the CIO Council for cross-agency coordination. And of course, our work with the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, who provide the catalog of security controls that we apply for commercial cloud services. Next slide. Drilling down a little bit, talking about the designations in our own marketplace. There are 3 specific ones for cloud providers if they've interacted with the FedRAMP program: FedRAMP Ready, In Process, or FedRAMP Authorized. Simply stating FedRAMP Ready is a snapshot of the cloud provider to see if they can make it, if they have the cybersecurity programs in place to actually eventually meet a FedRAMP authorization. In Process is when the cloud provider is actively working with the legacy joint authorization board or with an agency through the initial authorization process. And of course, when they're listed as FedRAMP authorized, that means that they either have an ATO in place from an agency and the FedRAMP authorization, or the provisional authorization in place from the Joint Authorization Board. Next slide. So why does the JAB issue a provisional authorization? The JAB doesn't accept risk on behalf of the government. It is basically stating that the cloud service meets a certain standard in cybersecurity that will enable agencies to reuse it. Conversely, when we see cloud providers coming in from the agency side, the agencies have done the initial assessment, they've accepted risk and issued an ATO. And when all that is done, they send the package over to the FedRAMP PMO, where we examine the package to make sure it's of sufficient quality, to make sure that there's hitting federal mandates and federal requirements before we issue the FedRAMP authorization. And at that point, we'll list them on the marketplace as FedRAMP authorized. Next slide. To give you a broad view of our stakeholders, we have over 200 agencies participating in the program. We have an agency liaison program that we established almost 3 years ago, where we have basically a duty expert in every agency who part of their job is to learn and be their agency's expert on FedRAMP. We have approximately 138 liaisons representing 80 different agencies at this point. And so what we've been able to do is use these liaisons to train them so they can go back to their agencies and let everybody know what new FedRAMP policies are out there or what they can and can't do with regards to FedRAMP. Regarding our commercial partners, we have over 400 cloud services represented in the marketplace. And regarding our assessors, we have over 40 recognized third-party assessors. Next slide. I've mentioned the FedRAMP Marketplace. That is the authoritative source of where you'll find authorized cloud services or any cloud services who are in the process of working with FedRAMP, as well as the recognized third-party assessors. It enables researching, and frankly, from the feedback that we've gotten, not just from government agencies, but cloud providers use the marketplace frequently as well to see, who's in the playing field. They need a system to do multi-factor. They'll look on the FedRAMP Marketplace and see what's available. We also see agencies using it to see what's available to answer their mission needs. And it provides contact information and service descriptions for all of the cloud providers that are listed. Do you want me to wait until the end to take questions, or can I take questions now?
Just wait until the end.
Okay, good to go. I'm going to talk a little bit about the current FedRAMP PMO. We have, next slide, please. We have 6 work lanes, and I don't want you to leave the table thinking that these are stovepipe work lanes. We have 6 specific work lanes, but the communication, collaboration, and the cooperation is vital across those work lanes to make this happen. We have folks that are working on agency authorizations, but we have to have interest from and introspection from the person who's running the 3PAO lane to make sure that communication is happening when we unfortunately get some packages that may be of some optimal quality. We want to make sure that we're taking corrective action to maintain that. And so the point of this slide is to show the breadth of the work that happens in the PMO and to reinforce the fact that it's done collaboratively. Next slide. And this is the team. I have 4 full-time feds in the PMO, 5 full-time feds in the PMO right now, and I'm blessed to have a couple professionals on detail to do specific things within the PMO. We have Michelle, who is not only functioning as the DFO, but she's working on some acquisition stuff for us. And then we have Joe Rotano, who we retained from the TTS Centers of Excellence to help build our information systems architecture. Everybody else you see up here, myself, Betsy, John, and Ryan and Zach are covering down on the lanes that I mentioned previously. Next slide. Now that I've given you some basic information about the program, I'm going to talk about the impact. So Sunny mentioned the history. I'm not going to rehash history, but where that history has led us is the impact of FedRAMP. Next slide, please. So the marketplace growth over the years, for this slide, the important takeaway is the amount of reuses. And this is just showing from FY20 to FY22. The value proposition of FedRAMP is agencies not having to repeat a initial authorization every time every subsequent agency wants to use a cloud service. So the number of reuses that we see, the larger the number, translates, at least in my mind, to the value proposition of the program. And as you can imagine, in the spring of 2020, when all of a sudden agencies had to support remote workforces, the number of reuses shot up because we were fortunate to have authorized cloud services in the marketplace that could support the agency's mission. The agencies could get those things ATO'd because they're FedRAMP authorized, and they were able to support their response to COVID. Next slide. I call this one our number slide because it encapsulates really what some of the metrics that we capture. We have 308 authorized cloud services in the marketplace. 80% of those roughly are at the moderate impact level, but we're seeing a trend in the other direction to high systems. The Legacy Joint Authorization Board has done 52, and this is in the history of the program. And the agencies are responsible for 256 of those. Sunny mentioned the authorization timelines. Those are meant a little bit about those. Those are measured for the Joint Authorization Board when the technical representatives give a go decision after a formal kickoff. So we have a formal kickoff meeting with a cloud provider. The technical representatives look at all the data in the briefs from the cloud provider. They said, yes, they have, we don't see any showstoppers, they can go ahead with authorization. That's when we start the clock. And then we stop the clock when I get the final signature on the PATO letter for that particular service. The agency timeline is measured by when an agency starts working with a cloud provider all the way through their initial assessment in ATO and the work that the FedRAMP PMO does as well. So it's a combination, it's the sum of those two activities. I mentioned reuse. The reuse numbers keep growing year over year. Again, illustrating the value of the program. We're up to over 5,600 instances. The number that I think is really interesting on this slide is that we have 92 cloud providers in process. So there are almost 100 different cloud providers right now going through the FedRAMP process to come into the marketplace once they get authorized. And that represents a growth in the amount of technology that the federal government has available to it. And then we have 22 that are FedRAMP ready. A little note about FedRAMP ready. I mentioned it before in our designations. Right now, FedRAMP is a demand-driven program. So presently, to get a FedRAMP authorization, you have to have an agency partner, or you have to have demonstrated demand in a business case to come through the Joint Authorization Board. So what we've done, and I think it was probably about 3 years ago, where we started allowing unpartnered cloud providers, those that don't have verifiable demand either through an agency partner or with the joint authorization, or enough to get through the Joint Authorization Board, to achieve a FedRAMP ready. This way, the cloud provider can get on the marketplace, demonstrate to any potential agency customers that they've made the commitment to get a FedRAMP authorization and, help in their business development. We do not do business development for cloud providers. We enable them to get a FedRAMP ready and come on the marketplace so they can do their business development. I want to make sure that we left that clear. The 4 security baselines corresponding to the FIPS impacts levels. The numbers that you see on the controls are based on revision 4. Those numbers are likely to change a little bit with the release of the revision 5 controls, which will happen shortly. Next slide. Talking about program successes, again, we passed the 300 authorization mark. And what that means since September of 2020, federal agencies have access to more innovative cloud technology than they did before. Interestingly, I mentioned that the majority of the systems that we have in the marketplace right now are at the moderate impact level. We've seen a 50% increase in the number of high impact systems that are coming through specifically from agencies. Typically, the high impact systems would come through the Joint Authorization Board, but we're seeing more and more high impact systems being authorized by the agency path. And that's an interesting stat to note. Just for the committee's knowledge, FedRAMP doesn't do anything with national security systems, or we don't do anything with classified materials. So the highest impact level we're going to get is FIPS high. So think law enforcement sensitive data, immigration data, that kind of stuff. That's where an agency will determine the impact level of the data and have a cloud corresponding to that. I mentioned the number of reuses, again, illustrating the value of the program. And we've partnered with the National Institutes of Standards and Technology to develop the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, or OSCAL. And so through this work, through several years of work, we were able to receive a package in the OSCAL format. We did it kind of as a proof of concept to see what it would take for us to have that sort of infrastructure inside the PMO to help automate the creation, delivery, and validation of security packages. And it worked. And so when I start talking about our strategic initiatives, you'll see how that plays together. With regards to OSCAL, we've hosted 11 what we call data bite sessions that have had over 600 participants that support and promote the adoption of OSCAL across our stakeholder community. We're in on this OSCAL, and we want to make sure that we enable adoption across again, with our stakeholders. And then, the other thing is we're going to release the Rev 5 baselines, which corresponds to the updated NIST guidance. And along with that is going to be the transition plan. And something new this time is the templates in OSCAL and Microsoft Word format. Next slide. So I've given a lot of history of the program, things that we've done up to this point. I'm going to go into some of our long-term goals and our strategic objectives. Next slide, please. So these long-term goals, these 3 long-term goals are stable across the program. We want to continue to grow the FedRAMP marketplace. There is a bunch of great innovative technology available, cloud-based technology. We want to make sure that we grow that, grow the marketplace and make it available for the federal government. We want to transform our processes. We had a major process transformation in 2017 when we went to what's called the FedRAMP accelerated process. Now it's the standard process for the Legacy Joint Authorization Board, which has reduced the authorization time for those systems down to less than 5 months, where it would take 18 to 24 prior to that. The flip side of transforming processes is, I'm going to talk a little bit about OSCAO and how we're going to automate, how we intend to automate some of the package handling and validations and stuff like that. But the flip side of that coin is also looking internally to what we can do in the PMO to make our processes more efficient and find ways to automate things like that. We're looking actively at the customer relationship management tool inside GSA to help with our CRM functions. It's time that we do that, and again, thinking that the efficiencies that will bring along will be incredibly helpful. And also, finally, promote knowledge sharing. This is a constant for the FedRAMP PMO. We want to make sure that we are providing information to stakeholders, prospective CSPs who want to come through the process, agencies, third-party assessors, industry groups, advisory committees, the whole 9 yards. And so that is a constant move for us. We're active in blogging. We put out a lot of great information in our blog. We don't set policy from our blog, but we amplify information and cool stuff that's happening in the program. Next slide, please. I talked about automation, and these 5 priority areas support those three initiatives. Okay, talking about redesigning the authorization path, we've heard a lot about how we want to make it faster, easier for cloud providers and agencies to go through. Part of that is not automating bad processes, but evaluating the processes that we have and then incorporating automation to make those better processes run faster. Establishing an automation ecosystem. I mentioned that we had a detail inside the PMO from the Centers of Excellence, and that's what Joe is working on building is our information systems architecture. Okay, for a long time we've been living off of borrowed time or space on disparate systems to support the FedRAMP mission, and we're 12 years old now, and we should be walking on our own. And so in order to do that, we need to figure out and to support automation, not just next year, but in 5, 7, 10 years, we want to make sure that we build the foundation to build on. And that's where that automation ecosystem is important. Automating continuous monitoring controls. Every conversation I have with JAB reviewers and JAB technical representatives is the way we do continuous monitoring right now is laborious. Back of the envelope calculation is that JAB reviewers are spending 80% of their time on continuous monitoring and 20% on authorizing new systems. We feel that through our automation initiatives, we're going to be able to swing that pendulum more to equilibrium and free up time for reviewers, in addition to providing better information to agency authorizing officials so they can make risk-based decisions. That's something that, at least on the agency side, that I'm looking to do a better job of, making sure that we're getting authorizing officials better information. And then we want to expand the automated validations and self-validations tool. One of the biggest problems we have when we get packages in, at least on the agency side, is quality issues, suboptimal quality of packages. So that causes the FedRAMP agency review team to have to pass it back to the CSP, get it corrected. No, it's not right. Come back, go fix it, and come back. With the automated validations, we're going to hopefully eliminate a lot of that back and forth, and that translates into a reduction in the authorization timeline as well. Next slide. So talking about an automated and modernized FedRAMP, the vision is that stakeholders are creating, submitting, and adjusting assessment documentation using a machine readable format. The FedRAMP PMO isn't going to dictate what tool stakeholders can use, which is why we've been working very hard with NIST on the language, the machine readable format where, somebody can use their governance, risk, and compliance tool of their choice. And as long as it can ingest the packages in that format, it's a win for everyone. So across the board. The goal is to improve the processes and modernize systems to provide faster identification. This is important, provide faster identification and resolution for cybersecurity threats, better protected cloud, which translates into better protected cloud services. Again, we have very manual labor intensive processes right now. And, by using and implementing automation and in the future, AI, we can potentially speed this up. And again, with the goal of providing better information to authorizing officials. The objectives are to provide access to more secure cloud services to support the agency's mission. Again, that was our first goal. Conduct faster authorizations. I know that's germane to the committee, and allow stakeholders to better assess risk by automating continuous monitoring. So I'm really excited about seeing where this goes with our automation and our strategic initiatives. Next slide. So I spent a lot of time laying the groundwork of what FedRAMP is, what we've done, and where we're going. And then, so what I want to share with you as I close out is a simple SWOT analysis on our view of the playing field, so to speak. Next slide. I'm going to start with strengths and go clockwise. So, the strengths are the continuous support and advocacy from GSA, TTS, FAS. You heard Sunny and Robin this morning, and Ann. So the regulatory environment is very permissive for FedRAMP right now. We see the strengths in cost savings by leveraging work done again by others. That's the reuse numbers, and collaborating between agencies, CSPs, and 3PAOs. When we talk about automation, one of the things that I'm cautious about is automating to the point where we're losing the human touch in between, in the collaboration with cloud providers, agencies, and third-party assessors. Having that opportunity to meet with those stakeholders and hear their concerns live and in person is incredibly valuable. Something that I spend a lot of time talking to stakeholders about, that FedRAMP is a collaborative process, that everybody has their part to play to collaborate to protect federal information. Unfortunately, some folks may not hear what the FedRAMP PMO has to say, but we all do it collaboratively. And I believe that it's mentioned there as a strength, and I absolutely believe that. Some of the weaknesses, time and cost for authorization, current barriers to entry especially for small businesses, and program policy is intentionally broad and subject to variance and interpretation. I've been trying to wrap my head around this one for a while. When I talk to stakeholders, I mentioned that our policies are like guardrails on a road. We can't expect all the cloud providers, we have 300 and some in the marketplace. We can't expect them to all march up and down the center lane of a proverbial road. Everybody has different technologies. Everybody has different service models, et cetera. So we set our policies in our, broadly as guardrails in the road. So as long as you fit in between them, you're okay. The downside to that is that that can create variance in interpretation amongst our CSPs, our agencies, and our third-party assessors. And so I believe that, we're trying to figure out a way to make our policy and guidance more clear, but yet accommodating for the variety of cloud service providers that we see. The threats, the increasing complexity of new and emerging technology. I've had some conversations with my OMB colleagues about generative AI. What is that going to look like inside a FedRAMP boundary? And how are we going to make sure it's secure? There's evolving threat landscape. As conflagrations happen over the world, between the Russians and the Ukrainians, in some cases, that doesn't that doesn't mean that we can take our eye off the ball in protecting federal information. Unfortunately, there's some slow adoption of cloud in some agencies. That could be culture, that could be resource driven. But we feel that there can be more done to have agencies adopt FedRAMP authorized cloud services. And again, the program misconceptions. What actually happens under the hood in FedRAMP? What are our authorization processes look like? That kind of stuff. I want to end with opportunities, because I think, standing in front of the inaugural meeting of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee, that's what you're hungry to hear. And from my perspective, market expansion through partnering with small businesses, I believe, is a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for agencies to be able to leverage innovative technology that's out there. The reciprocity and flexibility potentially with other compliance regimes. Can we possibly look at the maturity of an organization if they've gone through multiple security and compliance regimes? How deep do we need to look under the hood at them if they've been doing it for several years, just not in the FedRAMP space? And adopting requirements and processes to address emerging risks and technologies. I kind of mentioned that with the generative AI. As it stands, the FedRAMP process to get authorized was created a dozen years ago, and it was kind of a one size fits all. But I think one of the opportunities that I didn't necessarily mention up here, again, partnering with small businesses, but looking at ways to maybe morph our processes to accommodate the differences in hyperscale CSPs versus small businesses. Just food for thought as you embark on your mission to chew on some of these big, heavy problems that or address some of the opportunities that we have in FedRAMP. I think those are some of the things that are top of mind for me. And at this point, I'm open for questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Brian. 4 questions for the members in the room. If you will please take your name tent and put it on the side so it's standing up. And then I will call on you for all questions. Please also identify yourself when speaking into the microphone, so those listening via webcast or reading minutes after the meeting will know who made which comment. First, I'm going to go to Victor Brown, who is joining us remotely, and to see if Victor has any questions. Victor?
Hey, thank you. No, I don't have any questions. That was a very good presentation. It laid it out well.
Thank you, sir.
I think I turned that off. Now it's on. Okay. Press me to mess up the technology. It's Matt from NIST. Hi, bro. So this is not a question, but first of all, I love your website. It's a great example of transparency in a government conformance program and lays out information very well. I use it as an example internally to point to people to say, this is a good example of transparency for it. So that's awesome. You had mentioned reciprocity, which was, but you had kind of mentioned it one way of maybe taking certifications that have been done that not necessarily under the FedRAMP rubric. Are you aware of others who do reciprocity for FedRAMP, anecdotally, as an example?
Who accept FedRAMP authorization?
Yes, or not just accept it, but maybe even or require it.
Sure. The one that comes to the top of my head is the DoD, the DFARS clause. Jackie will help me on if I get the verbiage right, but they're required to use, if a DIB partner, defense industrial base partner, is going to use an external cloud service, it has to meet FedRAMP moderate equivalence.
How about commercials? PCI. This morning, there was some mention about working with the UK and other countries. I'm just curious if any of that has happened or if you're aware of it.
So I'm not quite sure about adoption. I do have anecdotal information in conversations I've had with cloud providers. So in wearing my hat as a cybersecurity program manager running the JAB lane, up until this year, I used to do one-on-ones with cloud providers. We would give an opportunity for all the cloud services that had JAB authorization or were working with the JAB to have a one-on-one with me, and I would sit down, we, flesh out the questions, but the information I would get from them anecdotally is their work in FedRAMP is used to raise the boat, raise the level of cybersecurity in their own organization. So their thinking was, if I have to go through this rigorous process for FedRAMP and it's really good and it really works, why not apply that across the board? With regards to foreign governments, I've probably had 6 or 7 engagements over the last year. Government of Japan, I've spoken to Australians, Brazilians, Mexicans, and the World Bank, and Canadians.
All right, I have one other. We run a lot of testing and conformance programs for the nation, mostly through the calibration centers. And, we do everything from concrete to peanut butter at NIST. I mean, and that's literally. We have found if you're doing a conformance program that has a surveillance mechanism to it, a continuous monitoring aspect where you're doing post certification review, a 3 to 4 to 1 ratio is usually kind of what was expected. Every new one that comes in then has a 3 to 4 level, times level of effort for the maintenance program going forward. So yeah, that's the difficult, because now you're going not linear, you're going logarithmic in your effort. Yeah. So I understand, empathize, and recognize that problem.
Yep. And so, we see, again, back the envelope calculation that legacy JAB reviewers are spending 80% of their time on continuous monitoring, and they're doing it for 52 systems. My challenge is scaling the program to a point, incorporating automation, being able to get, again, good data to authorizing officials for, 6 times that many systems. And so, yeah, no, it's a good problem to have, that we have more cloud providers coming into the marketplace. And it just, that's that, again, I want to go back to the collaborative nature that we have with the program, with our stakeholders, is hearing best practices from cloud providers or agencies and stuff like that. We'll be the first to say that, FedRAMP is a multifaceted, this issue is multifaceted, right? And we don't have, necessarily perspective on the whole thing. And that's why the collaboration is important. Great question. Thanks.
All right, great. John, you have a question?
Sure. So John Greenstein, Bluescape, also want to say it was a great presentation and thanks for the overview. I also, for my question, just want to validate one thing you said, which is as you're looking to scale through automation, the program does have a human element to it. So I just, our experience going through the FedRAMP program was, and I just mentioned this to Jackie as well, it took too much time, it cost too much money and all of that stuff. However, each of the human interactions was kind of kept us as a small CSP going forward. So more opportunities for that human interaction, even as you go through scale, really important. And it went the same thing with working with DISA. It was, yeah, that was it. So I just want to validate something that you're saying, that there is a human touch. The question is, obviously, as we look at those opportunities that you presented out there, that first one, I'm just kind of curious if you think what market expansion by partnering with small business looks like. If you could just expand a little more on that point and your vision for that.
Sure. So, we understand the tech landscape, that there are a lot of companies out there building, particularly software as a service. Probably not going to see a lot of infrastructure players coming into the marketplace. That's pretty much set. But there are a lot of opportunities for some really great innovative software as a solution, pieces to come in. Having to get, lay the groundwork. Something I talk about quite a bit is lowering the barriers to entry into the program without lowering the cybersecurity bar. Protecting federal information is a huge responsibility, but I'm curious. I want to find a way to lower the barriers to entry, barriers of cost, that kind of thing that affects small businesses in a bigger proportion than it would a hyperscale provider. And so I'm not sure if I'm on the right track with your question, but I want to make sure that, what can we do strategically, process-wise, policy-wise, standards-wise to facilitate that. You good?
That's good. Yeah, that's a good, it's a good start. I didn't know if you had something in mind that you were leading to, but it does sound. It's making the program, if I summarize, a little more advantageous for SaaS providers as opposed to the hyperscale providers.
Well, not to say that there won't be hyperscale SaaS providers, but we understand that, small businesses are likely providing SaaS products instead of infrastructure.
Great. Bill, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple of things. Just Conrad, I wanted to go back to Mr. Scholl's statement about other organizations requiring FedRAMP authorization. And particularly, I wanted to touch on state and local. I think you were familiar, maybe I wanted to prompt you a little bit to brag, because some state and local governments are requiring the FedRAMP authorization. Maybe you can talk about that for just a second.
Yeah, actually, we've seen a kind of I don't want to say a cottage industry, but kind of a cottage industry that's cropped up. We've seen individual states like Arizona and Texas implement basically FedRAMP type programs. And then there was a nonprofit that was created called StateRAMP to help facilitate the same thing across the state governments. Right now, the way that FedRAMP is funded, I'm precluded from interacting with state, local, and tribal. But we're seeing that the good work that is being done at the federal government is making its way out to those entities as well.
Well, I'm certainly not going to spend time today debating GSA's interpretation of the Intergovernmental Cooperation Act. I think my feelings on that have been stated in the past. I did want to also foot stomp the Berry Century for small business. I think that's an important thing to note here. I think we all know the time and requirements. To me, it's always akin to the same thing that we've been trying to do in getting folks from non-traditional backgrounds into government and into the actual federal service. The rigmarole that you have to go through for the federal resume process, it seems very analogous to me. So getting the opportunities for the small business, I think, is important. And then last, I want to ask one very specific question. I'm going to ask this very delicately. Because I know that you were representing GSA today on this platform. And obviously, in my past at the Office of Management and Budget, I always thought that this is one of the most impactful and important programs in government today. Many times stated that I think everybody should be using more and more of FedRAMP. So my question is this: in your personal opinion, and not speaking for GSA, with all of these opportunities that are on the table, do you believe that the FedRAMP program as it is today has the adequate resources to be successful?
I would leave that question to the folks at GSA, the leadership at GSA.
I think you've answered that question wonderfully. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Great question. So one of the challenges that we have with small businesses, right? Just to leave this out for the committee is, we want to get small businesses into the marketplace. We want to reduce the barriers. There's great technology out there. However, the challenge is convincing small businesses to make the investment with no guaranteed return on the back end. Just because we get small businesses into the marketplace that have great technology doesn't mean agencies are going to buy them. And so we have to find a balance of getting small businesses in and letting agencies know that capability is there.
Thank you.
Yes, Marcy.
All right.
This is Marcy Wishelman. So similar to Bill's comment, I'm curious about the authorization timelines, specifically the timelines that were mentioned for JAB and agency. I'm curious the period of time that those were calculated. Was it over a 5-year period? Was it over, and it's because we are seeing considerably different timelines. And I think that any person here would also agree with that. So I want to understand how those were calculated, what you're seeing currently, and then how you see that improving in the future.
Sure. Great question. So those are that's a running calculation. For our statistics, we throw out the top and bottom 20% outliers. So that represents the 80% solution or 80% of the cloud providers that we come through. That's a running total. So every time we have cloud providers come in, we track how long the process takes. I can understand what you're hearing is something different, because the perspective of a cloud provider who may have to go engineer something after they start the process is different from the actual assessment process that we're tracking. Okay, so when you see 4.6 months for the Joint Authorization Board, that's after the technical representatives who are designated representatives from the legacy JAB members say go until I get the final signature on the PATO letter. And that's the initial assessment done by the legacy JAB review teams. Conversely, on the agency side, when the agency starts working with a cloud provider and up and through ATO and then comes over to the FedRAMP PMO, we're actively measuring the assessment process, not the back-end engineering process or the contracting process that may affect cloud providers, but strictly the authorization process. Did that answer your question, Marcy?
Somewhat. So just to challenge the number a little bit, we, as of beginning of May, were told that the initial agency review process for, excuse me, not agency, PMO review process. So agency has already issued an ATO that gets delivered to the PMO. They perform their review as 5 to 6 months. That's the queue currently.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's being done to address that?
So what's being done to address that is we have recently undertaken some contractual actions to add reviewers to the review team. Through the American Rescue Plan last year, we added reviewers. We saw the queue go down from 13 weeks to 0. And so with the addition of these contractor resources, we expect to see the same results, but not on a temporary basis.
Okay, thank you.
And Noman has a next question. So if we could.
Yes, sir.
Yes, hi, Naman Ansari, Small Business Administration. Thank you for the presentation. And I'll preface my questions by saying I'm probably the least technical individual on this committee, so I apologize for some of these questions. But do you actually have data on authorization cost or small business failure rates for authorization that you could share?
No, we don't. We don't. What costs I could possibly capture are everything that happens inside the program management office. Costs vary amongst cloud providers. For instance, there may be a significant engineering effort that they have to undertake in order to, get to a point where they've incorporated the FedRAMP security controls. That's a cost. It depends on how they've engineered their system, basically. If they're bolting on the security after the fact, that may be more expensive than baking it in at the beginning. Knowing that they have that vision of a federal standard down the road. It also depends on the impact level of the cloud. If it's a moderate system, there are fewer controls than there are at the high impact level. So the cost is variant, or the cost varies, and we don't collect that from cloud providers.
Okay, and then just kind of follow up on that. You've mentioned the barriers to entry and the guardrails.
Yep.
Who defines those guardrails? When were they established? Who has the purview to dictate those guardrails and those factors by which you're getting to authorization?
So the security controls, the security requirements are signed off by, at present, the board or the Legacy Joint Authorization Board, who are the CIOs of DHS, DOD, and GSA. And there's a rigorous process in determining what controls out of the NIST catalog are applicable or should be applicable to commercial cloud. The policy guidelines that we talk about, when do you have to report incidents, continuous monitoring, performance management, the expectations of cloud providers on what you're supposed to do in the continuous monitoring phase are all worked out and ultimately approved by our governance body. And again, made broad to fit the broad swath of cloud providers that we have. Did that answer your question?
It did. I have some other thoughts, but I'll
okay.
say them for. Given those three agencies, I was actually very surprised today to learn of the number of cloud service providers that are authorized. And so I'm wondering if those who are defining the rules of the road from those three agencies, how many of those small CSPs are working at those agencies or have interacted with those agencies and have successfully performed at those agencies to ensure, and the kind of the representation of those defining the rules of the road are not biased by what they're seeing at their individual agencies. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, I can see that, where you'd come up with that. And let me think about that for a little bit.
Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure.
Great. Let's go ahead and go to Joshua's question.
Sorry, just making sure this is on. Josh Cohen from the VA. You kind of half answered my question already, which was around the incentive for a small business to enter it and perhaps the lack of guarantee of anything afterwards. Has there been any statutory or legislative of any kind of discussions around like fixing that via creating a pathway that would make it easier for agencies that maybe even want to incentivize vendors through a promise of future work? Because I think that barriers to entry, to the point about hiring with doing business with the government, preclude us from doing that often. And has there been any discussion of kind of considering that more in the regular barrier to entry conversation around government and contracting and acquisition relative to specifically small business CSPs, not the big box companies that probably already have a pretty good foothold here?
Right. I appreciate your question. My focus is on making sure that companies can protect federal information. That is probably a good question for the Federal Acquisition Service.
Understood.
All right, great. Let's go to Jackie.
Hi, Jackie Snoffer from TISA. Brian, I just have a few questions. Have you looked at, you talk about reuse and trying to encourage reuse. One of the challenges that we have in the Department of Defense is access to the repository for the artifacts to be able to understand the risk associated. And it requires, a signature, there's a bottleneck there, and then we have to get it over to GSA, and then they're approved, and then we have to get into OMB Max. And have you looked at transparency in those artifacts and ease of access as one of your initiatives, so that, and I, we obviously deal with the cloud providers as well. We have a lot of broken information. How do we get, and this is also a barrier to entry, how do we get inheritance clearly understood so that at a PaaS or a SaaS level, or PaaS or infrastructure level, a Bluescape type of company can actually automatically inherit that, and then we're only looking at the software layer, and understand that risk. But how do we really get transparency and ease of access into those artifacts for those companies that want to assess multiple providers for risk, so that they understand that when they're hosting their data?
Great question, and thank you for teeing that up for me. I didn't go into detail on this, but part of our modernization program is finding another repository. OMB Max is sunsetting, and it's also a moderate system. So right now, with the influx of high impact systems that we have, each of the vendors has to keep their packages internally in their own environment. And so if you can imagine, having to get an RSA token and all these managing all these different login credentials for the number of high systems that's increasing. One of the things that we're looking at in our acquisition activities for automation is a repository that's at a high impact level. And so, we're having discussions internally whether we're just going to have, the CSPs hold on to their stuff and just API it to the repository, and then, or, actually hold the data and have, users come in. But that's part of our acquisition requirements that we're looking at, because we understand the limitations of the current system.
And so to that, do you have a timeline for the initiatives that you outlined that you're looking at? And are those timelines driven by any resource constraints that you may have?
Yes, absolutely. We're in the process of going through an acquisition ourselves for a governance, risk, and compliance tool to be used inside the PMO. And our goal is to have that acquisition done by the end of the FY.
Okay.
And then, so we anticipate by the end of FY24 to have some fairly robust capabilities, understanding that we're going to be growing incrementally and changing. But by the end of FY24, when our ARP resourcing expires, we'll have some very robust capability with that. Also, we're looking at, I talked about some of our internal processes. We're looking at the CRM system inside GSA to use to support PMO operations type stuff. And we anticipate the first phase of that probably around the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay. And so in the GRC evolution, one of the things that we've done in the department is to open that up so that cloud service providers can actually maintain their compliance, that we can ingest POAMs, we can ingest the Conron data, those types of things. And we're not all the way there yet either, but allowing those cloud service providers to state their inheritance so that it improves reusability in the ATO process, but it also allows the cloud service provider to take on some of that burden to look at compliance. So are you looking at it from both sides, from the reusability on the federal side with inheritance as well as the cloud service providers?
Yes.
That's that part of the requirements model.
We have I don't want to say rudimentary, we have a very robust set of requirements that we're using for the initial authorization or the initial acquisition, understanding that, this is a stepwise approach. If you think of modernizing and automating FedRAMP in a crawl, walk, run approach, we're about sitting up right now. We're crawling as we get our CRM online at the end of or beginning of next FY. And then we should be up through walking and running by the end of the FY24.
Okay. And my last question, well, one was a statement to Bill on resources. Are they sufficient? The answer is no. So my team is one of the JAB TRs. And just for point of reference for the committee, every 20 cloud service providers that are added costs about $1.3 million in continuous monitoring expense in a resource constraint. And so that's a pretty significant dollar figure to understand as we look at the committee and try to evolve for automation and those types of things to drive those costs down, as well as what you said is to improve the visibility and reaction and risk understanding and threat understanding. And then last one is, what do you think this committee can do to help you in your meeting your initiatives and driving change in FedRAMP processes?
Yeah, so I mentioned, one of our first goals is to grow the marketplace, and we've heard quite a bit back to the small business issue. The current processes that we have, as I mentioned, are 12 years old. They were designed as a one size fits all, and so I'm in order to meet the first goal of growing the marketplace, that to me seems like the most where the biggest bang for the buck is looking how to get all those great technologies into the marketplace that may be provided by small businesses.
Great, thank you so much. And let's go to Lamont for your question.
Thank you. First, I want to start off and also echo, it was a great presentation, very informative. Excuse me. Going back to your FedRAMP long-term goals, because I took a few notes and I think I've heard you mention them as well with respect to the FedRAMP marketplace. And I want to echo that as well, because, of course, I'm solicited by a variety of vendors on any given day, participate in a series of conferences and vendor engagements. And one of the first questions I ask is, are you FedRAMP certified? Quite often the answer is no. And then it's almost like I really don't even want to speak to you until you can express some level of maturity within that process, right? So I definitely would be a false multiplier for us to kind of engage and figure out a way to expedite that process, crash that schedule, the expense, all the above, right? The transforming processes, and I think I heard you make reference to AI and ML technologies. I think more from a risk perspective, which of course we have to consider. But are you also considering and placing those technologies into your processes, bots, et cetera, to kind of help facilitate some of these processes?
Absolutely, a future state. Right now, we have folks inside the PMO who are building the foundation of our information systems architecture. For the past dozen years, FedRAMP has been working, hey, let's use this system because it's available. Let's use that system. We haven't been deliberate in creating or implementing systems specifically for FedRAMP work. We've been kind of patching it together to make it work, like I mentioned with the repository OMB Max. So what we're doing strategically in building this information systems architecture is not only preparing the ground for the automation work that we've done. I've had folks working with NIST for the past 2 or 3 years on OSCAL development. and working with CISA and CDM on automating continuous monitoring. But we need to set the foundation inside our own house, inside the PMO, to incorporate that, but yet serve as a launch pad for technology as it comes. So when we become more mature in our automated capability, we can start thinking about incorporating that because the foundation will be there.
Great. When you talked about promoting knowledge sharing, I would make the assumption that you're going to leverage some of that CM folks that you made reference to. Are there other approaches that you're considering to promote, knowledge sharing?
Yeah, we have a very robust blog presence. We try and advertise or shout out, all the great things that are happening in the PMO. I think in the last calendar year, I did close to 30 speaking engagements. We do training for agency liaisons. We do, we get invites from industry groups, from specific vendors to do speaking engagements. We also hold ISSO training for agency ISSOs. So if we have, and it's not just for the agency liaisons, it's the folks that are actually doing the assessments of the cloud services inside the agency. So if you have a group of folks that, may have questions, we put together an ISSO training where we have our folks from the FedRAMP review team share the knowledge that they have.
You ever consider doing vendor days to just invite vendors, specifically those smaller vendors, to come in and get an understanding of the process?
That's a great idea. So in 2019, we did something called JAB Interact. And we were originally going to, and what we did is we had an open day for cloud providers who were working with the legacy JAB to come in and talk about the policy and processes and stuff like that. It's possible to do, absolutely.
And finally, these, again, were what you characterize as your long-term goals, and long-term is kind of nebulous. Do you have a notional timeline on when you think you're going to achieve these outcomes?
Which one specifically?
All of the above.
So the, transforming processes, growing the marketplace, and promoting knowledge sharing is something that is it's continuous in the PMO. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we say we want to stop bringing cloud providers into the marketplace. We want to embark on a program of continuous process improvement, because that makes, whatever we can do to make ourselves more efficient is better for our stakeholders. And then, as I said, we want to share whatever knowledge that we have as new policies change, as new tactics, techniques, procedures come out. We want to be on the forefront of sharing those.
Thank you. My final question, based on your SWOT board, one of the weaknesses you identified was the program policy is quote unquote intentionally broad. Can you expound on why it's intentionally broad?
Sure. Like I alluded to before, is we have various vendors that have different technologies, different size of organizations. We've heard a lot about small businesses, but we have hyperscale providers as well. And we have different service models, the infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. We can't expect everybody to march up and down the single line, the center line of a road. So we set the policies, what I refer to as guardrails, and allowing for the differences in the diversity of this technology and the service model of the size business to be able to meet FedRAMP standards, meet and maintain FedRAMP standards. Because if we tighten those guardrails down, if we make them too narrow, we could potentially eliminate cloud providers from being able to maintain their FedRAMP authorizations.
Thank you. That's all that I have.
Great. We're going to go to Ravi next.
Hi, Brian. Great presentation. You mentioned, in your presentation that you are in discussions with governments of Japan, Canada, Australia, that kind of governments regarding how they can reciprocate, if somebody goes through FedRAMP, how they can honor it, right? Because they have their own schemes. In their discussions, where are you at?
So right now, they are strictly that, they're discussions. Word gets out that there's this FedRAMP program and it's really effective in protecting federal information and securing cloud services. And so they tell their friends and they tell their friends, and then all of a sudden, we get input, we get requests from representatives from the State Department in the trade section to say, or maybe in commerce, but hey, we have representatives from the government of Japan who want to talk about, the FedRAMP process, or they see our website and they say, hey, this looks pretty interesting. Our website is not PIV or CAC protected. So it's publicly available information. You can go there and see what's going on with the FedRAMP program. Same with our marketplace. And so that is, I don't know the genesis of where those foreign governments have wanted to, talk to FedRAMP. It's surely a feather in the cap of this program that other governments have expressed interest in applying the same thing. And we see that again with state ramp as well.
So is there any specific way this advisory committee can help?
Not off the top of my head. With that type of interaction specifically, they usually come directly to us and say, hey, we want to learn about the FedRAMP program.
Have you considered going to things like ICMC and ICC's International Common Criteria conferences where these delegates do come and they do talk about standards?
We haven't considered that, but that's something we will, certainly.
Yeah. So, okay. So have you also talked to European Cloud Standard EUCS that is coming through European Security Act, Cyber Security Act?
I don't recall having any conversations with EU members. I did have a conversation with Five Eyes members, British, Australia, New Zealand, US, and Canada. And also, I think, I want to say last spring, we had gotten some interest from the government of Germany, but that never materialized.
I see. Okay. If there is any specific way we can help, please let us know. Number one. Number two, my second question is, what is the Kanban is generally known as a big problem for everybody. So you are in the thick of it, you are in the middle of it. Do you have any processes in place for Kanban that we can look at and then say, oh, maybe here is a model that we can improve? Or you expect this advisory committee to come up with a model?
I would ask for, feedback on the existing model. I'll go back and talk to my team and see what we have available to share with the committee.
That's great. So third is, artificial intelligence, AI, LLM, that kind of thing is, is out of the hot press. Hot press. And where are you at in your thinking with respect to those kind of technologies?
In terms of implementing it?
In terms of what if those kind of services come into FedRAMP?
So I've had conversations with my OMB colleagues. We need to understand exactly how those AI systems interact with the authorization boundary, because FedRAMP doesn't authorize a cloud service provider. We authorize a cloud service offering. So there's a discrete technical boundary drawn around where federal information is going to interact and reside. And so we need to understand how those AI systems interact with that boundary in the federal data inside before we can think about that. And I've already had conversations with some of my OMB colleagues to figure out exactly how that works.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Great questions. Thank you.
All right, great.
Just wanted to thank everyone for the great discussion here. So as Brian has stated, we need to grow the FedRAMP marketplace, and we need to make that happen, we need to reduce barriers for both agencies and cloud service providers of all sizes and scale our processes. So the scaling of processes, there are many processes in place right now. They affect different organizations in different ways. And many of you have asked, how can we help with specific aspects of this? I think sharing that information about costs of things like continuous monitoring or strategies for implementing different kinds of reciprocity and understanding the impacts on different cloud service providers of different sizes. All of that information can help us point ourselves in the direction of, here are specific process improvements we can propose. As Brian described, this team and all teams make progress by setting concrete goals and iterating over time. So I think it's helpful for us to set the table in generalities of, here's how we are interacting with these processes. And I've heard consistently across the board here, we want the processes to, no matter which authorization path you take, to take less time without sacrificing security. I think that's achievable, but the question is, when specifically, or where do you start, and what optimizations do you propose and try to implement or consider? So I think the more that we can continue sharing specifics around this part of the process took this long and almost made me drop out as a small business, for example, or this part of the process will incur these long-term ongoing costs and I'm not sure what the scalability model is that I should build into my budget should look like. Those specifics can really help us understand as a group what kinds of process improvements to propose.
All right, Bill.
Brian, thank you for the presentation and for your leadership. This program has fundamentally advanced so much in the last few years, as evidenced by the growth in metrics. Two questions. I think one, FedRAMP is effectively governed by federal statute. The new FedRAMP law, OMB policy, NIST guidelines specifically corresponding to 853. Do you find anything within that rubric as being overly constraining that potentially contributes to the rapid pace or lack thereof of how fast the FedRAMP program can effectively run?
Off the top of my head, I'll say no. The regulatory environment has been set for, basically giving us our left and right lateral limits on what we can do. How we get from point A to point B safely, legally, and ethically, I think we can address through policy. There may be a point where we just can't go any faster, or there may be a barrier that we can't surmount that is regulatory in nature. And at that point, that's when I would raise the red flag up to my leadership.
Robbie mentioned AI is like new technology. Do you find as if there are sufficient control sets within the universe of controls that are available to you, particularly as it relates to the NIST baseline, that are relevant and fundamental to addressing as safeguards for the security of some of these newer types of technologies?
I really can't answer that right now. Again, I want to have we're working with our OMB colleagues to set up some learning sessions because we need to learn more about that and how it affects, and then also have the conversation, not just internally, but with stakeholders in our governance boards on how to apply controls in the baselines or in the NIST catalog.
Last question, I guess, traditional applications aren't really built in the way that they used to be. And traditional clouds are really no longer monolithic, in that we don't implement a cloud solution. We implement a workload or a service, and we stitch cloud solutions together. So as you're thinking about governance, risk, and compliance and automation, understanding the bifurcated nature of cloud and cloud responsibilities between customer and vendor, have you thought or are you thinking about how to facilitate the reciprocity, leverageability by working to create some kind of a reference framework that you can espouse across the GRC community, such that as, for example, GSA, if we're leveraging cloud A, B, C, D, each of which have their own set of customer responsibilities, at a generic level, those are auto-populated within GRC solution sets, such that as a customer tenant, plugging in what I use would automatically reference the set of controls which I have to specifically document, versus things that would automatically be natively available as a function of the underlying FedRAMP package. Any thought to that as a function of the automation work that's been happening?
That hasn't necessarily come up in conversation, but again, we're at the very cusp of starting this journey down with the GRC, and having feedback on what's within the realm of the possible to make things better, faster, stronger for agencies and cloud providers. Any input would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, great. Michael?
Michael from Google. I have a couple of points, so I just wanted to touch on those first, and then I'll jump into some questions. So, Bo, just going off of what you just said, hybrid and multi-cloud, we're seeing a lot of that in industry. I was curious if, as we're starting to look at how that's going to impact government and impact FedRAMP controls and start to move from authorizing potentially services to how do we actually protect this data as this data is moving in and out of clouds? Is that something that's on FedRAMP's radar today? Or do we have a set of controls coming that we should in RIB 5 potentially is this something we, as a committee, should start to think about advising on?
I would say that that's something that the committee can start chewing on as well.
Okay. Another question, executive orders, NIST, DFARS, the list goes on and on and on and on. Like SSDF just came out. It's going through that whole process right now with the whole secure developer platform. There's a lot of overlap normally in a lot of these different regulations. Is there anything that's going on in government today to sort of look at these holistically and say, can we align, right? From an industry perspective, we get the same ask like 4, 5, 6 times, right? As we go across, especially as we go overseas.
Right.
Are there ways that we could start to align and really bring these into like a FedRAMP program or have some kind of advisement into when a new executive order is going to come out? Can it come to board first or some other part of the agency that could say, hey, we already answer 80% of this regulation?
So what we do right now, when we, for instance, when OMB releases memos on IPv6, where the FedRAMP PMO sits between the federal government and commercial cloud providers, we want to make sure that the cloud providers are enabling their agency customers to meet the letter and intent of OMB memos, executive orders, et cetera. We haven't had any conversations about matrixing, creating a matrix of how these things and looking at dropping them all down and seeing what they look like in a Venn diagram. We haven't gone that far yet.
Gotcha. I think at least from a small business perspective, definitely from a large business, but from a small business, that would be very helpful for them because it's time and effort, right, to go and do this for each and every industry partner. Another question I had around hardware versus software. So are we focused more on software and services with FedRAMP authorizations and controls, or is there a hardware component? Because I know that as we've had questions come from various customers that are asking about like EKMs or KMSs or HSMs that we have within industry. So is there a certification program on that side other than like FIPS 142 and
Presently not for FedRAMP. That's a subject that came up very recently with the legacy JAB technical representatives, but we haven't formulated any policy or anything going forward on authorizing hardware. And frankly, that came up with a particular cloud provider that was authorized a couple years ago.
Got it. And then definitely when I hear scaling problems like 20 CSPs means $1.3 million, we're seeing a lot of scaling capability within industry, especially as we bring on AI models and ML, and we're doing monitoring with ML as opposed to individuals. There's probably a lot we could do in that space to help drive that. Whenever I hear the word continuous, AI is the first thing I think of now. So definitely interested to see what we could do in that particular space. Pivoting a little bit onto education and knowledge sharing. I was curious, you talked a lot about agency liaisons. Is there an industry component to that as well that we might be missing right now where we could, because you talked about quality of SSPs coming in and authorization documents. Is there potentially something we could do there as an industry to build like a champion liaison program where we could, as maybe large CSPs, help small businesses, train them up and help them get authorizations over to you?
That's actually a really good idea. Having a mentoring from larger or more experienced cloud providers who've been in the process for a while to small businesses. I think that's a fabulous idea. There are groups of cloud providers who have kind of formulated their own little, I don't want to say trade associations, but there is the Cloud Service Provider Advisory Board, which is a nonprofit that cloud providers can join. They have a technical working arm and they also have a government relations arm. I don't talk to the government relations arm for obvious reasons, but we are invited to their meetings quarterly to talk about things that are top of mind for them. They've provided feedback on us on continuous monitoring on, for instance, escalation triggers, that kind of thing. And so that is a line that we have into the cloud providers who've kind of congealed around in a quasi, official industry group. We also have been ramping up since the beginning I think I want to say the end of last year or the beginning of this fiscal year. We've started doing quarterly listening sessions with third-party assessors. And so that's through that function, we're getting the feedback from that particular stakeholder group as well.
Excellent. And then the last one's a kind of a softball. Rev 5, do we have a timeline?
Do.
Awesome. Is that something that could be shared soon, or do we have a date for a date?
I do have a date. I
Okay.
do have a date. Just watch our blog post.
Okay.
We want to make sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed before we release the baselines and the transition plan. But I will tell you, and for the committee's benefit, that's the first thing you'll see.
All right, great. We are going to be wrapping up our questions in the next 5 minutes. I know that we have both Matt and Bill who have some questions. So let's go to Matt.
I'm going to thank Bo for kicking the bucket over, because now we're all going to dive right into that. I just want to ask one question about the metrics that were used. There was X amount of CSPs that are FedRamped or in process. Is that actual CSPs, or is that services that could be multiple representing a single CSP?
That's
So it's a
cloud service offerings.
offerings. Okay, so not provide, but so that's okay. I just want to make sure.
Right, because we see some instances, even with medium-sized businesses, that have multiple offerings in the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. I love this idea of reference frameworks. I think that's something we should push on, looking at kind of compliance as code in the stack, reference implementations and things like, this is what a policy rule set might look like in a policy enforcement point for a SaaS offering at a low level or something that could then really help both with the small business and the speed and the automation thing. I think that's an awesome idea. Thank you for bringing that up. Cloud Security Alliance just put out an AI chat GPT security paper. It's kind of good. It's tangentially related to cloud implementation, but it's an interesting reference. And then Brian, you're being very kind in your answers. I will say that some, if not many, of the governmental requirements that are being exercised are constraining because they are specifically written for the government, right? And we have our own sets of laws and policies and rules and requirements. So when you look to expand out, it does become constraining. One of the things I've experienced when branching programs out into international mutual recognitions, which is something that was brought up, is when it's a US government thing, other countries kind of balk a little bit. They're like, oh, it's again. So the ability to have transitive applications into standards, like instead of 853, maybe we're going to call it ISO 27000 instead. And then that becomes much more palatable when you're trying to bring it to the EU or to Asia Pacific or something as well. So breaking out of some of those constraints, I think something would be interesting to look at as well.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, I probably should make a comment about this saying that we shouldn't look at 853 and we should look at ISO 27000 instead. But again, I'm going to leave that off the table for today. So obviously, I mean, by law, you all are mainly subject to FSMA, and that's the box within which you're playing. So obviously, 853 is the main ingredient there. But to Bo's point, and to our colleagues at Google as well, we have an ever rolling series of requirements coming from OMB, and I'll bring this up when our friends from there are going to be talking here in a little bit as well. But obviously, it would be interesting to have more standardization so that you all aren't just looking at one piece of the puzzle, and then the agencies are now responsible for all of these other things on top of it with those providers. Right. So that is something I'm thinking about. But from the other side too, that Bo was starting to touch into about when we're looking at the interconnection between the various pieces of those puzzles across clouds, et cetera. Obviously, 853 is a small subset of the ARM there. And I did want to call out the excellent work that GSA has done in the past around standardizing SLAs for cloud providers as well. So there's a lot of other levers that could be pulled here. Again, it's the Federal Acquisition Service, of course. So there's a lot of other things that could be done outside of, I think, just the purview of FedRAMP and the conversation we're having today. And I would really encourage you all to make sure that you're connecting with your colleagues over there on the acquisition team. We've done marvelous work, because that could remove some of those barriers as well that we're seeing between providers. So just wanted to flag that there's a much bigger policy box here that could be useful for achieving.
Great. Thank you, Bill.
All right, great. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. We are going to take a lunch break. And we are asking that all the members be back at 1:15. So please make sure that you are back in time so that we can start our next presentation. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have a feeling you're going to